One pill a day makes a person's possibilities limitless. The film starts in a bunker apartment at the top of one of New York's elite skyscrapers. Bandits are trying to break down the armored door. Edward Morra, who is one of the most successful people in the city, is hiding on the balcony in panic, while the old Reaper is knocking at the door. The bandits open his safe haven like a tin can. In such a hopeless situation, Eddie tries to understand how a person with such a high IQ like his could have played the wrong card. Edward Morra had a different life before. Lost and scrubby, Eddie spends a lot of time in bars, telling random day drinkers about his literary ideas, which he always confuses so that he can hardly finish a single clear thought. Eddie admits that he looks like a homeless person, or a person with some addiction. He is a writer and has a book deal, but being in a writer's block, Eddie cannot compose a word. He often procrastinates, lies on the couch, watches TV, and drinks sometimes. Edward is going through a breakup with his girlfriend Linda, not long before she gave him back the keys of his apartment. She was his heir and inspired him, but when she realized that he had stopped developing, she left. Eddie believes that if she were there, he would have found the strength to move on. Edward has already had an unsuccessful marriage with Melissa, who also left him. He says their marriage was the PT break. The hero accidentally runs into his former brother-in-law Vernon on the street. He invites him to a bar and asks about the book and successes. Eddie admits with shame that he is at the dead end. Vernon feels that he has found his client and offers an exclusive drug. Eddie refuses because he is afraid of drugs. To lure Eddie to the bait, he assures that the drug has passed clinical tests and that it is approved. Vernon manipulates the common myth that people usually use only 20% of their brain, and with this pill, it is possible to unlock their full potential. Eddie is skeptical, but feels that he has nothing to lose. That's why he agrees to take one pill to try it out. On the way home, Eddie meets Valeria, who is his landlady. She starts fighting because of the late payment. Suddenly, Edward begins to feel changes in his mind. He begins to notice and compare many details. He is absolutely calm, so while the woman is shouting, he carefully examines her. Eddie understands that Valeria is making drama not because she hates him, but because of personal worries. Edward notices a law textbook in her bag and suddenly remembers that he saw it 12 years ago. He remembers a bunch of facts and tells them to the girl. Her tone quickly changes. He helps her with her law report, and then they hide away. Entering his apartment, Edward is horrified by the mess he has been living in for months. Stacked dishes, scattered things, a pile of food packaging. He immediately starts to clean this up, forgetting about time and doesn't feel a loss of strength after. And finally, when Eddie is free from work, he can't stop thinking about the new drug and its effects. Edward does not recognize himself. He stopped smoking. He doesn't want to drink. He has not eaten for more than 6 hours. He is sane and extremely focused, and he knows what to do and how to do. He is clean, extremely clean, and concentrated. In less than a day, Eddie writes several chapters of his book. The next morning, he faces a harsh reality. His mind is a blank page, as if someone has reset all the unique settings and there is no trace of his previous composure left. He has become himself. However, he still has the new written chapters that the editor is ready to accept. Eddie understands that without the pills, he will turn back to depression, so he decided to visit Vernon. But while visiting him, Edward learns that Vernon has problems with clients and asks him about the drug. Vernon calls it
NZT48
and says that he lied about the tests and approvals of the ministry. In fact, the pills are Blackstreet and, in general, they are very close to illegal drugs. Edward decides that he needs a new dose. Vernon is afraid to leave the house, so he asks Eddie to do some things for him. The hero willingly agrees, realizing that now he depends on his ex-brother-in-law and his pills. Coming back to Vernon's apartment, Edward suddenly finds him dead. Everything at his home is turned upside down, so it's obvious that the killers wanted to rob him and they were looking for something. Eddie calls the police in horror. He guesses what exactly the killers were trying to find and tries to search for the hiding place himself. He remembers the kitchen that Vernon mentioned, and finally he discovers Vernon's dig. There is a large supply of NZT pills, a roll of bills, and a notebook with a client database in the oven. But Eddie does not have time to leave before the police arrive. At the police station, Edward is interrogated as a witness and released. Was the risk justified? Eddie tidies up his look, gets a haircut, buys nice clothes. He takes care of his body and health. Eddie successfully finishes his book in 4 days, and the editor publishes it. All this time, he takes one pill a day. Eddie discovers new opportunities, masters royal, wins at poker, learns foreign languages fast. It is enough for him just to hear a foreign speech, and he becomes like a native speaker. He conquers socialites with his intellect and makes accurate guidance on the stock market. All the information he has ever received is laid out on the shelves and is available for practical application. Eddie makes new friends in right circles. He feels confident and knows exactly what to do. After talking with investors, Edward decides that it is time time to change his field of activity, and instead of writing, he takes up finance. Eddie puts the rest of the money from Vernon's stash into circulation and multiplies it, but he is not satisfied with the slow pace, and in order to play big, he asks the Russian bandit Gennady for a loan. He easily finds a proper approach and convincing arguments for him. That is how Eddie borrows $100,000. Gennady warns that if Eddie doesn't give the money back, he will slit his wrists and tie them around his head. His new friend Kevin Doyle has taught Eddie how to trade on the forex market. The hero increases his NZT dose to learn faster. Within a week, he earns $2 million. He literally becomes a star of the stock market. His phone is blowing up with job offers, and Kevin Doyle informs him that a big energy magnate, Loon, is interested in them. Edward has dinner with Linda, who is amazed by his unexpected change of career and his sudden knowledge of Italian. Eddie confidently supports any topic of conversation, and they are quick to understand each other. Finally, Linda gives him another chance. While walking with Linda, Edward notices that a stranger in a white jacket is following him. He feels a chill run down his spine. A feeling of anxiety and worry overcomes him. Edward tries to hide from his pursuer, but he always seems to be one step ahead. At home, Edward tries to convince himself that he has just imagined it, but the anxiety does not leave him. In the evening, he begins to experience the first side effects of taking the pills, like pronounced exhaustion of the body and disorientation in time and space. He feels how his body is slowly weakening and his mind is fogged. Edward tries to cope with this, but understands that something is wrong. Eddie meets with Carl Van Loon and his advisor, Pierce Van Loon. The man is experienced enough as he has seen ambitious and self-confident financiers, but he understands that Edward is not one of them. Carl offers him cooperation, but Edward is not sure whether to trust him or not. He senses that there is something else there, not just a financial deal. Inspired by the changes, Edward walks and loses track of time. He has got memory lapses. Eddie walks through the city and ends up in the suburbs at some party. Still in the same daze, he sees a man in a white jacket following him. Then he spends time with a strange woman, leaves the party, and gets into a fight on the subway using techniques he has seen on TV. He wanders around New York again. When the NZT effect wears off, Edward wakes up in the middle of the street, not remembering the events of the previous night. At home, Eddie discovers that he has only one NZT pill left, which he decides to save. Edward prepares for a business meeting with Van Loon, studies documents, but cannot concentrate on work. Besides, the side effects and ailments distract him. At a meeting, Eddie cannot answer any of the questions clearly and is close to failure. He is distracted by the TV and learns from the news report that a woman called Maria Weinberg was found dead in a hotel. Eddie doesn't know her name, but he remembered her face. She is the one he spent time with at a party. In a hurry, Edward runs away from the business meeting into the street due to severe weakness. Near the restaurant, he throws up so he doesn't go back to Van Loon and heads directly home. Eddie finds Vernon's notebook with the client's phone numbers and calls them. He finds out that 3 of them died and the rest are admitted in hospitals in serious condition. Suddenly, he realizes that one of the phone numbers from the notebook belongs to a stranger in a white jacket who is following him. At the moment when Eddie is calling the numbers, the stranger is sitting on a nearby bench, so Eddie runs away from him. In a taxi, he breaks away from the pursuit. Edward meets his ex-wife Melissa in a cafe. The woman looks extremely exhausted. She was also taking NZT before, but being afraid of the consequences, she decided to stop. Because of this, she has developed an acute withdrawal syndrome. She says that everyone who has been taking the drug for a long time has got incurable diseases or even died. Vernon warned her about the possibility of a fatal outcome, so Melissa returned to the pills and began to gradually reduce the dose until complete cessation. She is worried about Eddie, so she advises him not to stop taking it right away, but gradually reduce the dose. Gennady meets Edward on the street and asks his money back. Eddie is scared, so he tries to take NZT in front of him, but the man takes the pill away and swallows it fast. Then Eddie withdraws cash and repays the debt to the bandit. So being in a critical condition, Eddie reaches the editorial office where Linda works and asks her to bring pills. He tells her all about NZT. The girl is upset to know that Edward's magical transformation is only because of the drug. He has hid the last pills in her house and now asks her to bring them to him. On the way, Linda notices a pursuer in a white jacket. The stranger kills 2 passers-by, which makes Linda take 1 pill to figure out how to get out. Finally, the girl manages to escape unharmed. Linda lets Eddie rest for a while, and the next day she says that she cannot stay with him. She is scared of the life full of risk that he is living now.
Where it will take us, Lynn, you can't even imagine. The things we'll be able to do.
Gennady comes to Edward and threatens him, demanding more pills. Eddie gives a couple of doses and then hires 2 bodyguards to stop depending on Gennady. Eddie asks Carl Van Loon to give him a second chance. The man is outraged by his previous behavior, but is flattered by his genius mind and hires Edward. Van Loon says that he does not allow anyone to behave like that. Edward is merging two large corporations belonging to Van Loon and Hank. He promises to bring both to unprecedented profits. Eddie makes a daily schedule, keeps diet, doesn't drink alcohol, thinks over the secrecy of the stashes with pills, and most importantly, determines the dose of the drug. He gives NZT to the lab for analysis so as not to wait for the drug to run out, but to be able to reproduce it for himself. The case of the murdered woman is still not closed, and the detective comes again and interrogates him. The witness identifies the suspect, so Eddie hires the best lawyer in the city, Maurice Brent, and continues to work, hiding from the management that he is accused of one criminal offense. Edward believes that he can move on and start his own career, but Van Loon keeps him close and increases his salary. At the same time, he says that he sees right through Eddie. He is very arrogant and does not deserve what he gets, because for this position, he did not have to please anyone and endure humiliation. After the frisk in the hotel room, Eddie decides to buy a bunker in a skyscraper. He meets Gennady again, who continues demanding pills and blackmails to disclose publicly the fact of suspicion of murder. Hank Atwood does not show up for a meeting to sign a merger agreement. It turns out that he is seriously ill and has transferred temporary authority to his wife. The woman says that she just needs to wait for her husband to recover. Eddie understands that Hank's illness is related to giving up NZT. After the identification procedure at the police, he discovers that his stash of drugs has disappeared. He suspects his lawyer, who is also Hank's lawyer. At work, Eddie receives a parcel with the severed hands of his guards. At this moment, withdrawal syndrome begins to set in, so Eddie loses self-control. He feels dizzy, he freaks out and feels sick. He leaves the office without warning the management. Edward is in his armored apartment when Gennady and his accomplices come to him. Having killed the building's security, the bandits try to break down the armored door. Edward Morra, who is one of the most successful people in the city, is hiding on the balcony in panic, while the old Reaper is knocking at the door. In such a hopeless situation, Eddie tries to understand how a person with such a high IQ like his could have played the wrong card. Standing on the edge of the balcony, he remembers that he has one NZT pill left and tries to find it. Gennady and his partners break down the door. In panic, Edward does not have time to take the last pill and drops it into the ventilation. The bandits beat him. Gennady shows a new, improved way to take the drug by injection. According to him, thanks to this, the effect begins immediately and lasts longer. The accomplices search the apartment for stashes while Gennady takes out the tools for torturing. Eddie quietly picks up a knife from the floor and kills him. Gennady bleeds to death on the floor, and realizing that NZT is dissolved in it, Eddie drinks his blood. One of Gennady's guards is blind in one eye, and Eddie blinds the other eye with a syringe needle. After that, taking advantage of his blindness, he points to accomplices and orders in Russian to shoot them, and then knocks him down with a piano. Eddie visits the bodyguard and the seriously injured man in the white jacket who received news of the death of their boss. At the same time, Hank's lawyer is not going to give back the drugs, but decides to keep them for himself in order to use the bodyguard to detain Bran and return his stash of NZT. A year later, Edward Morra becomes a senator. Carl Van Loon visits him and offers him a new partnership. Van Loon blackmails him, saying that he has closed his lab and bought a company that now produces NZT. Edward rejects his offer since he has several labs. Besides, he has studied the composition of the drug and changed it so that he will gradually cease to need it. Now Edward is free from Carl's influence, and all roads are open to him.